Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am so glad you're here. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 13 books that I read in the month of October. I do this video every single month, so I'm sure you guys already know what to expect out of this. Before I get into the wrap up, I just want to thank our sponsor of today's video, which is Skillshare. Since we are literally only 2 months from the end of the year, I have been trying to plan out my 2025 goals. But since I'm a very unorganized girly and my brain is very scattered all the time, Skillshare has definitely come in handy with helping me to organize my plans for 2025. Skillshare is the largest online learning community with thousands of classes that you can access under just one subscription. I'm actually currently taking 2 classes on Skillshare so I can upskill. One of my biggest goals for 2025 is actually to start journaling, so I've been taking the Bullet Journaling for Beginners class by Sarah. It's actually really been helping me out. It's been getting me very inspired to start journaling in 2025. As someone that's not very creative at all, it's a kind of tough task for me to do. The other class I've been taking is the Notion Masterclass by Ali Abdul because I'm just trying to stay more organized, and Notion is one of the ways that I do that. Skillshare truly have classes for every single topic you can think of. Some of those topics include productivity, creative writing, film, photography, or freelancing. The first 500 people who sign up to Skillshare using the link in my description will get a 1-month free trial. And thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Now, if you're new to my channel, you wouldn't have seen this before, but every single month in my wrap-up videos, I talk about my statistics and a genre breakdown of the books that I've read. I just do this before I get into the books so you guys kind of know what to expect. So as I mentioned before, I read a total of 13 books in October. This is actually really good for me. I feel like I haven't really read that many books in quite a few months now because I've been in such a bad slump the whole year. But October, I kind of like started getting out of that slump again. I had one DNF this month, which was Nothing Like the Movies by Lynn Painter. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I did read it in a vlog and I did rant about it quite a lot in that vlog. I just don't really think that book was necessary. I feel like Lynn Painter caused an issue between the 2 characters just to write a second book. And honestly, I feel like it kind of ruined the 2 main characters for me. Out of the 13 books, I read 5,135 pages, which is actually a lot more than usual. My average rating was 4.19 stars, and I actually did not set myself a TBR for October because I just started to realize that I never end up reading my TBR. And now onto the genre breakdown. I read 6 romances, 3 mystery/thrillers, which is less than I expected considering like October's spooky season, 2 fantasy books, 1 historical fiction, and 1 non-fiction. So a very wide range of genres this month. But anyway, now that I've talked through all of that, let's get straight into the books that I read in the month. In no particular order, starting with my absolute favorite book of the month, we have The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I went into this book with such little expectations because I'd never read a historical fiction before, and so I kind of was very nervous. I kind of thought that I wouldn't end up liking this, or I'd feel like very disconnected from it. One of the sisters has a family. She has a husband who ends up going off to the war, and then the other sister is kind of like very independent. She lives with her father, but he doesn't really support her that much. And when this whole war starts happening, she actually goes to visit her older sister who has the whole family. And I can't really talk about this book too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but it is truly like such a beautiful story. Like, this book made me feel so many different emotions. I'm not gonna lie, it did actually take me a while to get into this. Like, the first 50% I was like, what am I reading? Like, I'm kind of bored. It was like a lot of world building, a lot of character building, but I feel like that was all necessary to the story because if we didn't get so much backstory to the characters, I honestly wouldn't have connected to this book. I also heavily annotated this book. I feel like when I go into books like this, I always want to annotate them because I already know the quotes are going to be beautiful. And the writing was truly so beautiful, so poetic. I actually ended up giving this one 6 stars, which is something that I do very occasionally on my channel. It's kind of like an infinity star read. Like, it's that perfect that a 5-star rating is just like not enough. Now onto a little romance series that I read during the month that I actually did read in reading vlogs as well. I think like most of the books I read this month, I read in reading vlogs actually because I was very active. So if you haven't watched any of those vlogs, make sure you go and do so. Anyway, I read The Way I Used to Be and The Way I Am Now by Amber Smith. Starting off with The Way I Used to Be, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Before you go into it, you definitely need to look up trigger warnings. There is a lot of triggers in this book, and I personally don't get triggered by things, but there was actually things in this that were very hard to read. This book is following Eden, and she goes through this really horrible thing at the start of the book, and we're kind of going through her experiences since that happened and how she's dealing with it and how she's processing it, and she's like not really processing it, and so she kind of needs like a bigger support system around her, and that's when she meets the main male character who ends up being the love interest. But there's also like an age gap between them. I think there's like a 3-year age gap, but they're in high school, so of course that's like a massive age gap. Not that I can talk, Harry and I had a 2-year age gap in high school as well, but now we've been together for almost 6 years. Anyway, I actually really liked this, but I do think that it got repetitive at some points. That's why it wasn't necessarily a 5-star read for me. Then obviously I read The Way I Am Now. I actually really wanted to pick this one up very soon after the first, just because the way the first ended, you kind of just want more answers and you want to see where her story goes from there. And so that's why I picked this one up like a few days later. I'm not the type of person that reads series like back to back, so this was like very new for me. But anyway, I actually liked this one slightly more. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. And I feel like this book like really represented hope so well. If you've read the book, I love the meaning of like the dandelions, and I love how that message all came together at the end as well. And I love how it wasn't like a traditional happy ending in a way. I don't want to say too much, but I feel like it more showed that the situation doesn't define her, and that's what I loved about it the most. But that's all I'm going to say. I actually really liked this duology, and I highly recommend once you look up trigger warnings. Then the next two books go hand in hand as well. I read The Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. Yes, this is my first time ever reading this series, so it was definitely like a core moment for me. I actually put up a poll on my Instagram story and asked which one I should read first, and a lot of you guys said The Assassin's Blade first, so that's what I did. And honestly, I'm so glad I did it this way, because if you don't know, like the Throne of Glass series has like a different reading order, and this is the prequel book, so it's got like 4 novellas in it, I believe. And so it's like technically a prequel to the whole series, but a lot of people, like I feel like most people honestly, read it fourth in the series for some reason. But I'm really glad that I read it first, because it really introduced me to the world. It really introduced me to Selena, who's our main female character and who is the assassin that we're following this whole series. It actually really made me excited to continue the series as well. I just can't imagine reading it in any other order. Like this literally like set up for where we start in Throne of Glass. Like the way the last novella ends is right before we go into Throne of Glass, so it literally just makes the most sense that way in my opinion. Then obviously I went into Throne of Glass second, and honestly this one was a little bit disappointing. I don't know if it's because I started going into a slump or if I wasn't in the mood for a fantasy book, but I really struggled to get through this one. I actually found myself very disconnected from it, and the only thing I really liked was Selena and her character. But I just feel like there was a lot of like sort of world building going on in this book and not really much of a plot. And when there was things that were happening and the plot was like thickening, it would kind of get brushed over very quickly. Like there was like trials in this book, but each trial like wouldn't really last that long in the pages, if that makes sense. Like after a couple of pages it would be over, and that kind of really bugged me, because I love a book with trials, but we just didn't get enough of them. So I actually ended up giving this one 3 stars, I believe. I'm like really hoping that the lighting stays good in this video, because it is actually currently 6 p.m. as I'm filming this, and it's definitely going to get dark within the next hour. So hopefully I can finish it before then. Anyway, next book I read in the month was The Island by Natasha Preston. This is a little thriller. It's literally like a 300-page thriller, so I read it in like one sitting. It is following a private amusement park that happens to be on this island, and it's following a bunch of these like child influencers who get invited to the island to like promote it for the weekend. And that sort of already took me out of the story, because I was like, I don't really like reading about social media and influencers in books. And the fact that it was like very young teenagers, like they were just so immature, and I just hated their characters so much. Like I feel like this is like a common theme with Natasha Preston's writing, because I actually DNF'd a book from her today. Like it is November 2nd, so obviously it's not included in this, but I DNF'd another book from her because her characters are so unbearable to read about. But that being said, the plot in this one was really good. Like I literally sat there the whole time just wanting to know how it was going to end, and I really liked the story. I really liked the setting. Like I was actually very pleasantly surprised. But then we got to the end, and in the very last sentence of like the epilogue or the last chapter, I don't even know, it literally like left you with more questions than answers, and I just don't like that in a thriller book. Like I hate when I have questions at the end. I know some people like that and like to like have their own interpretations of it, but I like everything to be wrapped up perfectly. So yeah, I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was actually quite disappointing. Okay, next up, this was honestly one of my favorite books of the month. We have Daydream by Hannah Grace. This is the 3rd book in the Maple Hills series, and so far the last. We don't know if another book's going to come out or when it's going to come out, but I loved this so much, and I kind of went into this with like low expectations as well. This one we are following Henry and Hallie, and we have had so many cameos of Henry throughout the rest of the series, and so I sort of knew that I was going to love his character. But I feel like sometimes when this happens and like we're waiting for a specific character's story, the author like ruins it and kind of like changes their character. But honestly, his character was the exact same. We just got more depth to him, and that's what I really, really loved. Hallie, our main female character, she's trying to write like a romance novel, and she's never written a book before, but she also hasn't really experienced much romance because she was in this like really long relationship, but he was just like a really awful guy. He was very horrible to her, and so she hasn't really had any good romantic experiences. And that's when Henry comes along and they strike up a little deal. He starts taking her on these like little romantic dates and little adventures so she can write about it in her book, and then she just has to be his tutor, so it's like a little win-win situation. Oh my god, I have such a soft spot for both of the characters in this book. Like, I cannot wait to reread this book, honestly. This is like the kind of romance book where I feel like I could reread it over and over again, and I definitely want to so I can like annotate it as well. But this was 100% a 5-star read for me. Like, it was literally perfect. I literally cannot explain in words how much I loved this book, and it's had such mixed reviews as well. Like, I've seen so many people talking so negatively about it, but trust me when I say it was incredible. Next up, I read The Half of It by Madison Beer, which is her memoir. This is actually a memoir that I've been wanting to read for quite a while now. Like, since I found out she had a memoir, I was like, I really, really want to read this and read about her life. And this did not disappoint. I don't read memoirs very often, and I also do not rate them when I do, because obviously it is someone's story. I just feel that it's wrong to give them a rating. But this was like so perfect in my eyes, and I feel like I've been talking about this a lot recently, but I have gone through mental health things in the past, and I'm also currently going through mental health problems as well. And so reading like a celebrity that's gone through the same thing who we perceive as perfect, it was so like eye-opening, and it was honestly so emotional as well. Like, I definitely found myself tearing up in this quite a few times. My favorite quote, I actually did not go into this book with the like expectation that I was going to annotate it, but I ended up annotating quite a few quotes in this. My favorite one was, "You never know the silent battles people are fighting, even the people you think you're closest to. You'll never walk in my shoes and I'll never walk in yours, and we shouldn't have to in order to empathize with each other." If that's not the perfect quote, I don't know what is, because I think that is perfect, and I feel like this book really opened my eyes to things as well, and sort of gave me like a new perspective on life and a lot of the mental blocks that I'm having as well. I think this was perfect. I loved this, and it honestly made me love Madison Beer so much more as well. Also, this is like a little mini hardback, and look how cute the hardback is underneath. Like, it is adorable. Like, you might as well buy it to have on your bookshelves. Okay, I apologize if the camera's in a slightly different position. I just had to swap out my battery, but we're back. I feel like this happens to me every single time I go to film like a sit down video. Like, why does this happen to me every single time? Anyway, next book that I read in October was Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook, and for some reason I don't really remember much about it, even though I did quite enjoy it. This is obviously the second book in Elsie Silver's new series, which is called the Rose Hill series, I believe. And each book in this series is going to have the single dad trope, which I actually really, really love. This one is following a country singer called Skylar Stone, and she ends up staying with this man in town called West who has 2 kids. One of them is a little boy who is very, very shy. He like doesn't really speak to anyone. And then the daughter is like very, very outgoing. Like, I love her so much. I love both of the kids in this book. I know a lot of people don't like kids in books, but I actually really, really enjoy when kids are in books, to be honest. I feel like it just makes it so much more cute and so much more realistic. But anyway, you literally cannot go wrong with a small town romance. Like, the relationship in this book was so sweet. I feel like there was like so much depth to these 2 characters. Like, they both had their own little problems, but then they like helped each other with their problems as well so much. And I love that West like provided such a warm and welcoming home for Skylar as well, because she was kind of scared because she's like very, very famous, of course. I don't really have much to say about this, but I did really, really enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars. Okay, the next book is a book that I've been very, very excited to read, and I've been very open about how excited I've been to read this book, and that is Unsteady by Peyton Corrin. This is a little hockey ice figure skater romance, and I really, really like that. It kind of reminds me of Icebreaker, but like there was like more depth to this book than that. So I actually recently read this in a vlog. It's actually up in my most recent video on my channel, and I definitely had some thoughts about this while I was reading it. To start off, I went into this book with the expectation that it was going to be very similar to the Boys of Torment series, because that's what I heard from a lot of people. Now, I didn't really see the resemblance to the Boys of Torment series whatsoever. Like, there was like one element or like a few plot points from like Finding and Keeping 13, but it just felt like the author kind of took the major plot points from those two books and then like brushed over them in this book, but they were like sort of there. That being said, I still did really enjoy this. The first like 10% in, I was like, oh, like I'm loving this, like I'm hooked, I'm loving these characters. And then from like probably 10% to 60%, I was like, okay, this is very insta-lovey. I don't really like these characters. Like, they seem very, very immature. They don't seem like college students. Like, they kind of seem like they're in high school or something. So I kind of felt very disconnected from it, and it was kind of starting to put me in a slump. And then the last like half of the book I actually really, really enjoyed. I did start feeling more connected to it. I started feeling more emotional towards it, and that's when I started liking it a lot more. I ended up settling on a 4-star rating in that video, but I actually thought about it more and I would give it a 3.75. It wasn't like a 3.5, but it definitely wasn't a 4-star read, so I just thought that I'd go in between. I don't think I've like ever given a book like a 1/4-star rating, but here we are. There's a first time for everything. Okay, I have one more physical book, and then I have 2 books that I read on my Kindle that I don't have physical copies for. So the next one is The Right Move by Liz Tomford, which is the second book in the Windy City series. Clearly I was in like a massive romance mood this month. I feel like I haven't read this many romances in a month in a while. I was so excited for this one because I know that this one specifically is a lot of people's favorite out of the Windy City series, and that is because of Mr. Ryan Shea. He is now one of my favorite book boyfriends. Like, I loved his character so much. I've been like rambling on about this as well in a few videos now, but I'm actually going over to the US next year for a holiday. It is me, Harry, and then 2 of our friends going as well. So it's a group of 4 of us, and we're actually going to go to an NBA game. Don't worry, I'm gonna like vlog the whole time I'm there, but we're gonna go to the Lakers versus Golden State, which is gonna be quite a big game, I think. And I know nothing about basketball, but honestly reading this book, because Ryan Shea is like a famous basketball player, it honestly made me so much more excited to go over there and like see a basketball game, because in a way it feels like I'm gonna be like reliving the experience of reading this book. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook and I ended up giving it 5 stars. Like, I really, really loved this. The only thing I didn't like, which has nothing to do with the author or the writing, it's just that it had a lot of smut, so I was finding myself skipping a few chapters because like they were very, very spicy, and I don't like reading spice, let alone like listening to it in an audiobook. So I did skip quite a few chapters because of that, but I don't want to like drop my rating because of spice, because that's just like a personal preference of something that I don't like. Okay, now that I've gone through all of the physical books, I'm going to talk about the 2 books that I read on my Kindle. The first one was The Boyfriend by Freda McFadden, which was actually a new release. I literally don't really remember much about this book either. I feel like when I don't have a physical copy, it's literally like out of sight, out of mind. Like, I literally just lose all of my memory about the book. So I'm just gonna like look at the little synopsis on Goodreads so I can like refresh my brain a little bit. So a synopsis of the book, I'm going to try to explain it without reading the whole thing as best as I can. We're following our main character Sydney, who is dating. She's like actively dating people on dating apps, and she kind of like goes through all of these like really bad dates at the start of the book and has a really bad experience with one in particular, and she ends up meeting this man who like defends her and sticks up for her, and then they end up dating and they end up together, and he seems like the perfect man. And then in this specific town they live in, there starts being like all of these brutal murders of all of these women, and so she starts feeling a little bit iffy about the guy that she's with and kind of starts like investigating him herself. She also has this best friend and they live in the same apartment building, and her best friend is like dating this really, really strange guy, and she thinks that like he's the suspicious one. So it's kind of like a whole roundabout thing of like feeling like 2 men in her life that are very close to her are like suspicious in a way. I actually like was gobsmacked by the end of this book. Like, I feel like Freda McFadden's books haven't made me feel this shocked in a while now. Like, I was genuinely like, wow, like I truly thought it was going to be one specific ending and then it was something completely different, and I was so confused at the end. I was like, who are these characters? Like, all of these weird names that are coming up. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I feel like Freda McFadden literally cannot go wrong. I love anything that she writes. On the other hand, the other thriller that I read during the month that I don't have a physical copy for, I didn't really like, and that was Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I actually listened to this one as an audiobook as well. Again, I don't really remember much about this book, but that's literally because even when I'd finished the book in the moment, I honestly had no idea what I'd just read. Like, it was one of those books that just didn't really make sense to me. It didn't really add up. Like, I didn't care what was going on. It is following two sisters who also had an older sister who went missing like 20 years prior, and it is following them 20 years into the future, obviously, and another girl in this town goes missing, and they start to see a resemblance to when their older sister went missing, so they start investigating it. And let me tell you, like, some of the stuff they find out in this book, I was like, again, gobsmacked. I was like, I feel like this is something that could definitely happen in real life. Like, it felt very close to like a real serial killer case that could happen, especially because like I watch a lot of true crime videos. Like, I love Alan O'Neill, I love Bella Fiore. Like, this is so off topic from books, but I just feel like it felt like I was listening to like one of their videos. I just felt myself getting very, very bored in the book. Like, it was very, very repetitive, and our two main female characters, the sisters, were also very, very annoying characters. Like, they were just very frustrating to read about. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't amazing, and it was also my Fable Book Club's pick for the month as well. So it's a little bit disappointing when it's the book club pick, but that's okay because the book club pick for November is actually Daydream. So at least I know that that's going to be more successful reviews because I loved it myself. But anyway, that was the last book that I read in the month of October. I'm honestly very, very happy with this reading month. I feel like I got out of my slump. I've read such a wide range of books as well, so many different genres. And I feel like it's also because I didn't set myself a TBR and I didn't have the pressure of like a set list of books that I'm supposed to read, because honestly that always stresses me out. So I really, really liked just being able to pick up and mood read whatever I wanted to read. But with all of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see some more content from me. But with all of that being said, thank you again, and I hope to see you in my next one.